Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We are today in our session number 2 of our February challenge. It's like something that we came up last minute due to the recent, changes and buzz around these AI tools that have invaded our lives, probably also our students' lives. So we are going to leverage the potential of these amazing tools, and hopefully our insights will be valuable for you too. So we're going to start with a little just a moment. I'm gonna share my screen to welcome you, to remind you where we are, and then we will begin with the questions. Okay, so today is our session number 2. We're going to meet one more time next week for different lesson activities, different assignments, today's lesson plans, ideas. Today's session is about assessment and rubrics. So we are going to start with the quizzes, little questionnaires. I'm going to stop sharing the introduction. And I'm going to put the link to the activity in the chat. So you just need to click on it and you're going to be inside to answer just a few questions. It's not going to be as long as Quizlet last time. It is really, really fun. If you're not familiar with this software, I highly recommend quizzes, especially that Kahoot has become not free anymore. It's now a kind of requires you to pay for a subscription. So this is an alternative. So if you're not aware, it's amazing. So just join this quizzes link. I'm sending it again to people who are joining us right now, this moment. Good afternoon, everyone, again. So the link is in the chat. Click on the link and we will jump into the activity. So you see that you are inside. Quizzes, the link is in the chat. Can you see it? So everyone can write in the chat. Also, if you have questions, if you have comments, feel free to unmute yourselves and speak, and also send us, your questions in the chat. After this little, introduction activity, we are going to listen to Svetlana's ideas, and then we will have some practice. Hopefully we have enough time for what we have planned. So I need to, I don't see that you're inside. Let's just double check if you're joining. Yeah, okay, I got 14 participants. So we're going to start. You can still join. The link for the activity that we are doing now in quizzes is in the chat. So for those who are joining us right now, just click on the link and we are starting right now. So the first question, let's begin. There are different views for you as teachers going into the question. This is an open question, so everyone writes their own answer. Also view, the response to the community ideas. Okay, we have 20 seconds to think of your answer. You can think of whatever, it can be 1 word, 2 words. Yeah. 10 seconds left.
Where do I put my answer?
So the link to this end. Okay, it's going to be in the chat. Just join us there and you will see the next question. Now let's see the results. Let's see that someone got into the participants' view responses. Assessment. Okay, now I see assessment and evaluation. Perfect. Let's move on to the next question. This is a poll question, no correct answer, just choose what you feel about assessment right now. Stage of your career. Have 10 seconds, okay? We're in the middle of voting. Or what's your current perception of assessment? We have 27 participants on Zoom, and if you still want to join us here, okay, it can be real fun. Some people said it is time-consuming, maybe not always objective and hard to create. And some people still don't know what to think about assessment. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So if you want to join us, the link to the yes, I can turn off the sound. The link to this activity again in the chat. So please just click on the link in the chat and you can still join us in the middle. This is also fun because it's, you know, your students can also join when you do this with them. Let's move on to the next question. 10 seconds. Okay, I'm not sharing my sound from the computer, but if you hear something, that's from my computer itself. Okay, let's see.
Wow.
This one is a quiz question, so you should see the answer here. The leadership board. Okay, so this was an example of classroom assessment. Okay. I clicked on the wrong button. So this is going to be the next question. Next slide. Okay, 2 seconds and we're done. And formative assessment is feedback driven, okay, rather than evaluative. Next question, we have 4 more questions to go. Obviously, you need to check several boxes. Five seconds left. So summative assessment includes the following components, and the right answer is the 3 boxes that you needed to tick, right? Next slide. About the product or the process. It's about the product. So the other one is about the process, right? even though it's not the real focus of today's session, but it's nice just to remember some things about assessment and basics. Kind of, 3 seconds. Hopefully no mistakes today. True, right? This is true. Next question.
Yes.
2 questions left. The next question is an open question. You need to think about an answer and type it yourself. You have hopefully enough time, 30 seconds. I'm going to hide the answers from Zoom because we need to think of your own. But of course, we already have some correct answers coming in. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to move on to the next question, and we already got some correct answers here. Rubric, rubric, scoring rubric, perfect. Okay, points, test. The answer is rubric. And the next question and the last one for today, before we jump into our fun stuff, new stuff, is going to be this question. So let's see. Fill in the gap. So ideally, you need to write 2 words. If you don't know the 2 words, write 1 will be enough too. But if you can come up with the 2 words collocation, this will be perfect based on all the other questions. And then we jump into Svetlana stuff. So we have 5 answers in, 20 seconds left. Any other ideas?
Can't get it to work.
No, teachers use
To make instructional decisions rather than evaluative ones. See, 5 seconds. Let me just show you some answers. And these are, okay, we have rubrics, formative assessment, and summative assessment. So what would be the right answer? What do you think for the last question?
Assessment.
Formative assessment, right? The right answer is formative assessment. Perfect. Okay. So now we are, if you are interested just technically in this wonderful, game tool, it has a lot of interesting variations of questions, open-ended, multiple choice, completely free. Tons and tons of ready resources for English teachers. You can just browse the library and choose something in your own teaching. I will share the link with you right now, and then we will, and Svetlana, you can, in the meantime, get ready with your screen, and we are going to remember, first of all, just in a few words, what we did last week, and move on to our today's focus on assessment. So here is the link if you wanted to try quizzes for yourself. Just make sure when you sign up, choose the teacher's account. Then you'll have all the wealth of materials. Okay, so here's our speaker, Lana, today. I will introduce her just in 1 sentence. We already know some of you, Svetlana from Montenegro. She works with the Ministry of Education. She does teacher training seminars. She presents in multiple international conferences. She works with the British Council, and more and more and more. Just Google her. And thank you very much, Lana, for joining us today again. And the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, just Google her. Well, we can always ask ChatGPT, right? It's kind of in fashion nowadays to ask ChatGPT all the questions we have. Anyway, today is the 2nd day of our boot camp, and we have more time, and I'm very happy about that. So we shall start. Okay, is it? Yeah. So I suggest starting with a brief overview of what we did at our previous session. So first, we discussed the CEFR framework, its purpose, levels, scales, and can-do statements. Then we looked at the elements of the curriculum spider's web and focused on materials and resources, and discussed approaches to curriculum design and chose the backward design approach. With backward design, we begin with the learning outcomes we want to achieve based on the corresponding CEFR scales and can-do statements. These outcomes then inform our syllabus design, materials and tests, teaching, and ultimately the assessment of achieved learning outcomes. As an example, we chose the CEFR scale, online conversation and discussion, and the corresponding can-do statement for C1 level students. Well, you can see it on the screen. I will not be reading it again, just for the sake of time. Then with the help of ChatGPT, we designed a language task for our outcome to get students to analyze the differences in register and tone and discuss each language style in different contexts. Then students were supposed to share their own response in the appropriate register and share and discuss their writing online. Okay. Then we created accompanying materials, a blog post and a news article. And finally, we checked the level of our generated text using the text analyzer, an AI-powered profiler. So that was the last step. So that's a brief overview, very brief overview of what we did on day one of our minicamp. Now, if you have tried the steps and resources we talked about last time and have any questions or comments, please type them in the chat box. We'd be happy to answer them or address them at the beginning of our next session. So if you have any questions right now, then could you please type them in the chat box? I'll try, maybe if the question is kind of short, then I will give answers right now, or maybe we'll start our next session with the answer to your question. Have you tried any resources? Have you tried any steps? Okay.
And you played with the prompts yourself, right? You use the lovely prompt where you can actually generate what you need for course design, for curriculum design. Okay, then I will ask just to write a yes or no in the chat. So yes, if you played, you've done your homework, and no, you haven't. Maybe plus or minus, whatever you want. Y and N. Just
if you have tried any prompt or okay.
So let's just
no.
on the chat. So we want to see that you had some.
All right.
So and we have kind of half and half. Not yet. Yes.
Okay. All right. A little. Okay, that's all about experimenting. That's a new tool, probably much knowledge, right? So probably that's about experimenting. It was always busy. Well, that's a common problem. It's always busy. But in your handout, you've got a link to the Open AI Playground. And in the playground, you can have 24/7 access to the model. Because we actually don't need ChatGPT, we need the model itself. Anyway, so today we'll focus on assessment. How is their learning assessed? We'll take a look at different types of assessment and learn some strategies that we hope will help you align or create new assessments in line with the CEFR using modern tools. So back to the backward approach. The backward design approach includes the following 3 steps. Step 1, identify what students should know and be able to do by the end of the learning cycle. And that's the learning outcome that we actually identified with you based on the CEFR scale. Step 2, determine acceptable evidence or create an assessment to measure that learning. And step 3, plan a sequence of lessons that will prepare your students to successfully achieve the outcome. After settling on outcomes, we need to create an assessment to measure learning. So basically, that might be a new approach to some of you, because the usual approach, the most common approach, was to plan lessons, right, and then think about assessment. Now we think about first about learning outcomes, and then we plan assessment, and then we plan lessons. Okay. So we need to consider the following 2 questions at this stage. How will I know if students have achieved the desired outcomes? And what will I accept as evidence of student understanding and proficiency? So that means we need to determine the appropriate assessment format to use. We can use different formats such as oral presentations, written assignments, or multiple choice tests. And we need to identify specific criteria that will be used to evaluate students' performance. These criteria should be based on the CEFR descriptors for the appropriate level of proficiency. For example, if the assessment is designed to measure speaking proficiency at the B1 level, then our criteria might include pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and coherence. I have included a link to the chapter from Exploring Language Assessment and Testing Handbook with a variety of task design options that are open to the language assessment developer, together with their descriptions and examples and information on what they assess and some practical tips how to use them. We won't be much focusing today on assessment tasks themselves, but if you consult that resource, you will see that there's a huge array of tasks available with a beautiful description of their benefits, what they are used for, and in which context you can use them. The next step, so that's actually the first step, you decide on language, on testing tasks. The second step is to decide on the assessment criteria. And this will dive into deeper. When designing assessment, it's essential that the teacher crafts a rubric that clearly outlines the criteria or dimensions or descriptor categories using different terminology. For the sake of our session, we'll keep working with the same can-do statement for the online conversation and discussion scale for C1 level. So basically, I'll be using the same can-do statement that we used last time, just to show how you consistently can integrate that into your teaching and assessment and planning processes.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that the way we envision this training to go on is that Lana has prepared a very clear roadmap, like with the steps, right? You're doing 1, 2, 3. So how do you use AI in creating learning outcomes 1, 2, 3, and you got the handout last week in the last session. So today we're talking about the rubrics and assessment. And again, there is a handout PDF file where you have the links of everything that is presented here now. You have the links in the PDF file that are clickable. So the steps are there. They are described in in a PDF file in the first page, and then you can follow the links. You can follow the steps I hope we have enough time to actually explore the steps and do something ourselves today during the session. Hopefully ChatGPT is not overloaded and we can access it. But actually, this is the idea. You get a PDF file, it's in your email, it's here in the chat. You can download it, open it in your computer. And what Lana is presenting is in front of you on a PDF roadmap, action steps, what you need to do. 1, 2, 3. So just follow those steps in order to practice what we're showing you here. I hope that's clear. Thank you so much. So continue on.
All right. So overall, getting back to the topic, overall, an assessment rubric for the ability to adapt one's register according to the context of online interaction should focus on the learner's ability to use language appropriately and effectively in different online communication contexts. And we need to consider a set of sub-skills or competencies required to be able to adapt register according to the context. Now, how do we come up with ideas on sub-skills or dimensions that are here? So what we can do, in addition to peer discussions and consultations or Googling, is to use a large language model like ChatGPT-3 to help us brainstorm the ideas. For our session, I have made the following prompt that sets the role and context for the model, act as a CEFR expert, and the task, suggest criteria, descriptor categories for an assessment rubric to assess. Then I give the scale, my scale for online communication, for example, online conversation and discussion scale, or then I specify the level, the can-do statement, or our learning outcome, and then I specify the kind of students I have, because again, the terminology will be slightly different depending on what kind of students you teach. All right, so that's the prompt. Then I feed, okay. Then so here's what we get. after we feed the prompt, ChatGPT may come up with lots of ideas like register, fluency, interactive strategies, detailing every single ability, listening and understanding. Okay. Multimodal communication, flexibility and adaptability, cultural awareness. Then you can also type continue to have the model produce more results. So the more results it produces, the better. But you will notice that sometimes the longer list becomes, the less relevant criteria become. Like the last one is, for example, professionalism, the ability to maintain a professional demeanor. Apparently, ChatGPT is slightly shifting to a different domain. And here's one brainstorming strategy that I would like to show to you today to get ChatGPT to explain why this or that dimension or criterion is considered. And usually this tip helps dive deeper into the data that ChatGPT has. So when you feed in the prompt, you can add one snippet. Let's think step by step. So if you ask ChatGPT to think step by step, okay, ChatGPT will provide both the criteria and questions underlying these criteria. So it will try to explain to you why it picked certain criteria and which questions it tried to address. For example, if it is vocabulary, then assess the students' use of appropriate vocabulary for the context of the conversation. Are they using technical or specialized language where appropriate? Are they able to shift to more informal language in more casual context, etc.? So you get deeper information, and that's a really nice snippet to use for your prompts. Now, based on my brainstorming session with ChatGPT and points that I believe are relevant for my context, I have picked the following 4 dimensions or descriptor categories. Again, I've done that for our session, so please don't take them as literally 4 criteria for that scale, because it all depends on your context and your students. We might want to fine-tune them further. But now we'll use these dimensions for particular assessment formats to see how that works. So that's register, fluency and coherence, vocabulary and grammar and syntax. One of the primary intended uses of the CEFR is self-assessment. As self-assessment is intrinsic for learner autonomy and is an essential component of formative assessment. And here's a question. Do you use self-assessment with your students, and how do you use it? Do you use self-assessment in your practice? Do you use that with your students? How do you usually use it? So that's a question to you. Would you please type your answers in the chat box if you feel like typing today?
Let's begin with a yes or no. If anyone wants to speak, just unmute yourself. You can bring us, share your examples of self-assessment if you want it.
At the end of the course? Yes. Do you use it at the end or the beginning, before the course? Yes.
Interesting. So actually, we do have a lot of people who are using assessment.
Occasionally in office.
I use it throughout the process. As we learn any skill, I have them assess whether they got the skill or not.
Okay. All right.
I want to tell you that I use the self-assessment. I don't really go for grading, but what can we do that it's part of reality? And one of the things that I figured out is a very good thing is I sit one-on-one with a student and ask them how much do they assess their total achievements throughout the period of year. And then they have to come up with a grade because this is what we do. And then, you know, it's a nice match, what I thought and what they think they actually deserve and getting. And I really love the whole process. Actually, what happens in the second time, it usually gets better. They're more realistic.
Oh, that's great. That's a great approach. That's a great approach. All right. So we use that. There are at least 3 levels of self-assessment in language programs. I mean, roughly 3 levels. Learners can self-assess their overall target language ability using the CEFR self-assessment grid. I have included the link to the CEFR self-assessment grids on the Council of Europe webpage, so you can find that in your handout. The self-assessment grids, official grids, are given in for, I think, 35 languages, if I'm not mistaken. The second level is at the level of individual courses. Students self-assess themselves at the start of a course or during a course or at the end of the course to reflect on their progress. The third level is for individual lessons. And I think the most beneficial way is to give learners opportunities to self-assess pre-task and post-task. If you haven't tried it, I mean, for my students, especially those who have reached the plateau level and do not notice much progress being made, this type of self-assessment really works. So before and after, to see what they actually managed to improve. Across of all these levels of self-assessment, it's useful to present learners with a simple scale for each can-do descriptor, such as I can't do it yet, I can almost do it, I can do it, I can do it easily. So it's pretty simple. Such a simple scale can give learners a visual indication of their progress. And again, using ChatGPT, we can very quickly create a rubric for students or generate a self-assessment rubric. Here's a prompt that you can use. Again, as usual, we give a task to ChatGPT, create a rubric for students in tabular form with the columns, and then you specify the columns you need. For example, I chose dimension. I can do it easily, I can do it, but I need more practice and I can't do it. In the rows of the dimension column, do not use the names of dimensions, start with I can. So it will transform the statements, the ability to use something into I can use something. Use the following dimensions and then you feed in, you paste your dimensions. Make I can descriptions easy to understand for students. Again, if you do not have language students, you will probably want this to make this I can descriptions easy to understand without any linguistic jargon. And be sure to keep other columns blank. Well, the last instruction was given to ChatGPT because it just insisted on filling in each and every cell. So I had to include it like separately. Be sure to keep other columns blank. And here's what it generated. Here's what we get. We get a self-assessment rubric. It takes about probably 15 seconds for ChatGPT to generate. It includes the dimensions with our I can statements and several levels of performance. I can do it, I can't do it, etc. The next.
Maybe anyone has any questions? Maybe I can ask a question as we go. Does anyone have any questions? I think this could be a really useful tool for our students. I'm just thinking on my feet. I can imagine myself even, copy pasting some of the can-do statements in our, national applied guide for aligning the material to the CEFR, and then just, instead of reading the 30-page guideline, I can just probably import some of the can-dos and ask ChatGPT to produce such a scale for me, for my students, like a PDF file, so they can easily, work on those. That was my question. Is it possible? Does it, do it well? Have you tried it? Can it summarize? I'm talking about ChatGPT function. Can it work like this? That we can feed some information and it will produce?
Yes, definitely. You can feed in, there are unlimited ways you can work with ChatGPT. That's a large language model, and it produces all types of things that you can actually do with the text, sometimes even more. But again, that's an important point. When you train your ChatGPT, you can, of course, feed in the text and ask ChatGPT to study it and to pick out some important points. Or to remember certain things or certain approaches that you believe are important, and then integrate them into any rubric that you are making or any item that you are making. But again, I'm stressing one thing. It's important to first think about the final product, what you want to get, and do some sort of reverse engineering. So when you think of the final product, for example, I need a map that will map out outcomes and content. But you need to think strategically and think what you actually want to get. And then when you write a prompt, you basically include all the details that are important for the model to actually generate what you want to get. So that's the process. Just feeding it with something like, can you generate something, never works, unfortunately. I mean, it works, but you get something like generalized information that you can, I mean, that's like the generalized version of the internet in the answer.
And it's going to be a lot of, you know, trial and error, but we appreciate so much those prompts that you're writing for us and sharing with us so that we can all just, you know, get something that has already worked for sure. And we will just try and improve it if we need or something like that. So that's really helpful that we have those prompts. Gilad, do you have any question? Do you have a question? You're raising your hand.
Yes, I would love to ask a question. First, I would like to apologize for missing the first part of the meeting. Perhaps you've already covered this, but how often or in what points during the course, during the semester, do you give out student assessments, self-assessments?
It depends, like that's what I said. There are 3 levels, right? The first type of assessment, or the first level, is self-assessment, when students self-assess themselves before the course, right? Like a general assessment of proficiency, that's the global level. Then in terms of a particular course, then we can assess students before the course, during the course, and at the end of the course. And that there can also be assessment integrated into a particular lesson. So that's within the task, pre-task, post-task, etc. But ultimately, there are no exact rules, like how many times do you assess students, or students need to self-assess themselves. It's basically your decision. According to the CEFR companion, right, students usually use the global grade, self-assessment grade, and they self-assess their level of proficiency. So they check which level they're at. And then when you plan the course, I mean, the good practice is to provide a self-assessment opportunity before the course and after the course, well, and during the course. So,
of course.
And I see James has shared an interesting
Thank you.
Yeah, James has written in the chat that he gives the self-assessment around the project. So whenever you have a project in your, you know, course, in the course of the course, you would probably offer your students some kind of a self-assessment tool where they can look at the rubrics, look at all the components that you anticipate them to perform, and give themselves like a self. I think it's also, it sounds like a really useful way of using self-assessment. And I'm also doing something like that in checklists where students have to, you know, evaluate whether they're doing what they're expected to do. And I agree, we probably don't use it enough in our practice teaching, and we should try it more and see how it works with our students.
Definitely. This is something that I would like to try. Thank you for your answer.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, Hanimi, could you please open the door? Thank you. So, teacher assessment is the next type, and today we'll look into and try to develop 3 types of rubrics: holistic and analytic rubrics recommended in the CEFR, and I've also included the 3rd type, which is not very popular. That's a single point rubric, and it's not mentioned in the CEFR framework, but I think you might find it as a very good assessment tool. And in a few seconds, I will explain why. We shall start with holistic rubrics. A holistic rubric is the most general kind. It lists usually from 3 to 5 levels of performance, along with a broad description of the characteristics that define each level. The levels can be labeled with numbers such as 1 through 4, letters such as A through F, or words such as beginning through exemplary. What each level is called isn't what makes the rubric holistic. It's the way the characteristics are all lumped together. Holistic criteria consider all the criteria simultaneously, requiring only one decision on a scale. This means that such rubrics are better for grading, for times when students will not need to use feedback, because making only one decision is quicker than making several. And I think that, have you used holistic rubrics? Do you like them? Okay.
Yeah, can you think of an example of a list of rubrics? Is it
No, okay. You've probably seen them when there are several levels of performance or scores. The highest one is A, for example, then B, C, D is the lowest. And then in the description of the descriptor, you will be given all dimensions together. So that will be grammar, vocabulary, presentation, coherence. So all the dimensions that are important, they will all be lumped together. And that makes...
Probably don't realize it, but we usually do a lot of holistic assessment. Like when
maybe that's about the name. Yeah. They are often used because they are very easy to make, extremely easy to make. It takes less time to make them. They are much faster to grade because that's just one decision. You circle A and then you evaluate. The assessment is basically done. But there is one disadvantage. There is no targeted feedback for the learner. So the learner gets an overall result and again, may not know what actually affected that performance or that level. Mm-hmm. Now you can see an example of a CEFR-based holistic rubric here. And as you may see, there is one score, and for each score, there will be the description of the performance level. So it will be handles communication in everyday situations, despite hesitation, constructs longer utterances, but is not able to use complex language except in a well-rehearsed utterance, etc. And there will be various levels. The next type, we'll quickly go through types of rubrics. The next type is an analytic rubric. An analytic rubric breaks down the characteristics of an assignment into parts. So the assessor or teacher can define exactly what aspects are strong and which ones need improvement. So this time we'll have scores by each category, by each dimension of the descriptor. So separately for grammar, for vocabulary, pronunciation, presentation, etc., whichever dimension you pick. The main advantage of this type of rubric is that it gives students a clearer picture of why they got the score they got. It's also good for the teacher because it gives us the ability to justify a score on paper without having to explain everything in a later conversation. You can give all the scores that you gave by different dimensions. Analytic rubrics, though, have two significant disadvantages. First, creating them takes a lot of time. Have you ever created an analytic rubric? Well, if you have this experience, then you probably know that filling in each and every cell with a particular category is extremely time-consuming. And there is one more disadvantage. Students rarely read them. So basically, so much time invested, and students skip all the information, but it's actually a big task. Now here, you can see an example of a CEFR-based analytic speaking test rubric with particular dimensions of descriptor category or descriptor categories such as grammar and vocabulary, pronunciation, interactive communication, and levels of performance or grade linked to corresponding CEFR levels. Okay. And that's the continuation of that. All right. And the last type of rubrics, that's a single point rubric that is not really widespread. It's a lot like an analytic rubric because it breaks down the components of an assignment into different criteria. But what makes it different is that it only describes the criteria for proficiency. It does not attempt to list all the ways a student could fall short, nor does it specify how a student could exceed expectations. So you see the middle column, which is filled in with dimensions and their descriptions, but you do not give their detailed description. You give them just for one level of performance. Usually that's this performance that we grade as good or satisfactory. The single point rubric has several advantages. It contains far less language than the analytic rubric, so there are more chances that your students will read that. And it takes less time to create while still providing rich detail about what is expected. Areas of concern and excellence are open-ended. So if you see that, again, that's one of the disadvantages for teachers. You will have to do much writing when filling in this rubric. And what else is important to mention here is that since they are open-ended, both weaknesses and strengths, the sky has no limits for your students. It means there are no limits. They may exceed your expectations. And again, you have more flexibility, and the feedback that you will give to students based on this rubric will be much richer. And I would say the quality will be much higher. Now you can see one sample of the single point rubric from Edutopia with the link. Later on, I will share my presentation with you so you can follow all the links mentioned here. Here they call it, the columns are called as labeled as things we can improve. I will be assessing your essay on this, and then you list dimensions and things that were amazing. So imagine getting such feedback, but then again, you will have to invest some time of yours. Okay, now we come to the interesting point, which is generating rubrics. So sometimes, again, generating a rubric may take much time of yours, but with a language model, with a large language model, it's much easier. For example, if you want to generate a holistic rubric, you can use the following prompt. Make a holistic rubric for students with a scale from 4 to 1. You can actually use your scale. If you label the scale with letters, then you will probably write with a scale from A to F in tabular form with the columns. Then you have to give your columns that you think should be given there. For example, scores and descriptors. It can be something else. Fill the rows of the scores column with 4, 3, 2, 1, and include the following dimensions in the descriptors. And here you paste your dimensions that you've picked, right, based on your can-do statement. So that's the task. Okay, and that's what we get. Again, takes about 15 seconds to generate, and then you get a holistic rubric. Okay, all the dimensions, you can see that they are all there, we agreed on. The next type of rubric that we can also generate with ChatGPT is an analytic rubric. This time I asked ChatGPT to make an analytic rubric for students with a scale from 4 to 1 in tabular form with the columns. Then you give the name of columns and fill the rows of the scores column with 4, 3, 2, 1 if you use numbers, and include the following dimensions. And again, you paste the dimensions that are important for you, that are relevant for your can-do statement. And that's what you get. And this time you get ChatGPT generates an analytic rubric for you. It's an example. And the next type of rubric is generating a single point rubric. This time you ask ChatGPT to make a single point rubric for students in tabular form with the columns. Then again, you give the titles of columns that you think are relevant for you, concerns or areas for improvement, dimensions, evidence of exceeding standards. And then fill the cells of the descriptor categories standards column with descriptions of dimensions. And then for a particular score, usually that's this good level of performance or good performance. If you generate all the types of rubrics in one chat with ChatGPT, then you don't have to specify it. You can just pick that score level that you need, and then ChatGPT will do the job and will create or generate a single point rubric for you. So that's the rubric it generated for me based on that set of dimensions that I provided. So that's basically one of the ways to align teaching materials with the CEFR course. That's basically the points that I wanted to go through with you when studying assessment and looking for ways we can automate certain processes like generating rubrics using ChatGPT. And your bootcamp task 2 today will be to evaluate assessments to ensure they accurately measure the intended learning outcome and what students can do, and think of ways to align them with the CEFR. So the first step, you need to think of tasks that will help students to demonstrate what they have learned, and assessment criteria and dimensions. So today we focused on assessment criteria and dimensions. Then step 2, develop a self-assessment rubric. And step 3, develop a holistic, analytic, or one-point rubric. I have included.
I may interrupt, so that I can also add another step number 4, since it's, all those steps, everything is so clearly presented to you now. Basically, all you need is to wait for ChatGPT to be available online. Just get it there, copy paste from the handout, add your descriptors, add your learning outcomes with the task that you have in mind. You probably already have some tasks running from one semester to another, from one course to another. So those of you who are in higher education and you're using Moodle, for example, I would add step 4 and copy the rubrics, the beautiful descriptors that ChatGPT produces. Of course, you would probably polish some of them and adjust them to your particular needs, but I would also copy paste them into your Moodle in the course, in the assessment, in the assignment task on Moodle, where you actually decide between the regular grading or advanced grading. In the advanced grading option, you do have all the options, holistic criteria, right? And also the 1 point where you actually give feedback in writing. So you can choose one of the 3 options that Lana presented to you and play around. And if you're brave enough, I would do it this semester and I would try the 3 different options to see how it works. Of course, holistic is the easiest. It just, it's just when the students submit whatever assignment you give them, you just pick 1, 2, 3, 4 according to the holistic description of the perfect or whatever grade that you provide. So this would be my suggestion for step number 4. Okay, go ahead, Lana.
So a more detailed description along with the relevant links and tools is provided in the mini bootcamp primer or handout. So you can find all the prompts that they are showed to you today, and links to some useful resources that they might come in handy. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to get in touch with me on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And I can stop the presentation here. And just a word of warning. Again, ChatGPT does not replace thinking. It cannot think, right? So that's, I would say, turbocharged autocomplete. We have to be realistic about its capabilities, and at the same time, we need to think about all the details we want to include, the context. So the more information you provide to the model, the more chances you have to get really valuable information from it, valuable data, and the result that you expect to get. Okay, now we have some 10 minutes, right, for questions, luckily. So
5 minutes.
We do have, 5 minutes. Right.
Yeah.
If you have any questions on that, then I'll be happy to answer them. And Elena.
Yes.
I have a question for you, Svetlana. After the algorithm produces or generates the rubric for you, what kind of process would you use to examine it or check for errors or check that things are that it serves the intended purpose? Do you have any kind of final step to the process that is a fail-safe kind of a
some sort of validation process, right? To check that. Well, definitely. But my approach is I usually start with much pre-work. So I start with first thinking of what I want to get, right? And then I use this reverse engineering. I feed the details that are needed to get my expected result. So as part of pre-work, at times I may even ask ChatGPT to act as a prompt engineer and to ask me questions that are needed to answer a particular request from me. And then it gives me all the questions that I need to answer so that it could generate the result that I need. I mean, sounds probably a bit phantasmagoric.
Can you provide an example for the self-prompting?
you know, not right now. I mean, I could share my screen, but it will take some time. We've got some 5 minutes, but I can start our next session with that because it's a real, actually, I will show you part of that process because I use it in lesson planning for lesson planning purposes. And I will show you how you can interact with ChatGPT and get it to ask you the questions that you need to answer so that it could generate the result that you need. It's really a very interesting process. But so that's about pre-work, right? Then during the process, at times when it generates a certain output, I may correct it and I may ask it to, you know, I go back and forth asking it to change certain things that I don't like. For example, change the description in cell A or change this, right? Then I can double check and then I can start a new chat and I can paste in the output that it produced and I can ask it to, again, to check the quality. You can use ChatGPT for that purpose as well. And so that's the process. And then, of course, you validate it with your colleagues. If you are working in a joint course, then you need human power. Yeah. And together with your colleagues, you can go through the rubrics, for example, right? Yeah. And see whether all the points are there and whether they are, I mean, there is this level of validity needed for a rubric.
I also suggest probably piloting it with your own students, reading the descriptors with your students, with your, you know, clients, target audience, and see whether they understand what is demanded of them and what they need to achieve, what they need to be able to do. And I would also like to address Ehab's question in the chat, and I think this would be the wrap up of the session today. So Ehab is asking us to open ChatGPT live and probably demonstrate how to use the software hands-on, logging in, providing the prompts, looking at the feedback and playing around with it, deciding what to do with it. So my first response would be, first of all, having produced those worksheets and hands-on materials with the links and everything, I would ask everyone literally to do your homework and try to actually log in, because sometimes there is the system is crashing, sometimes it's overloaded. If you are not able to log in at any specific moment, just keep trying. It's gonna work, right? So keep trying. It's not gonna take forever. Maybe the next minute, within the next 5 minutes, you will be in. Log in with your Gmail account and literally just take the prompts that Svetlana posted in the PDF file and copy paste. You have those brackets to replace with your own information. So put whatever information you think, right? Your target students, the level that you're going to be teaching. Try to insert information that suits your level, the level of your students, their age, their interest, maybe the topic, the genre of the text that you're teaching, or whatever module you're thinking of, and see how it works. It's magic. So I really, literally, I'm asking you to play around yourself, because it is there is a learning curve. It's not something that we can demonstrate. Plus, there are tons and tons of YouTube videos now popping up every day from brilliant teachers all around the world, English teachers and other teachers, exploring and playing around with ChatGPT. And there are tons of instructional videos on how to log in, what to write, what kind of outputs you get, and how you can use it in your teaching. So I'm also doing my best trying to share those resources with you, because all these instructional videos are, real treasure. Just watch them and follow, do your work, do your part, and play around yourself to see how it works, because, we really literally want to spend this. We have so little time, just 1 hour. We have a lot of very ambitious idea to try to show you how you can align your major, course design with CEFR using the AI. So we try to tackle a lot of issues here. So probably not that much time on the technical part of the software, but I hope you can deal with it. And if you have any questions whatsoever, we are here for you. You can bring your questions, and I'm also available in between the sessions. So just talk to me. We can maybe do something on campus one day. Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments or last questions for our words for me, for Svetlana in the chat? I can see that you're thanking us. Thank you also very, very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week, next Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
On Tuesday.